So we're going to be talking about Ghostbusters: The Seed. It's an unused first script that was going to be Ghostbusters 2, much in the way Ghost Smashers was the unused first script you can find online that led to Ghostbusters. The first script was written solely by Dan Aykroyd and completed in 1986. It was set in Scotland. It's going to be really interesting to find out. Here's Dan around that time and what he looked like. It's a year before he made Dragnet, which is often forgotten. A great little film that he did with Tom Hanks. So this would be a world without Bobby Brown on our own. This would be a very different Ghostbusters 2. Some people even think of it as Ghostbusters 3. A little teaser here of the fairies, the fantasy element that we'll see later on when I discuss it in more detail. I've been unable to find a full script online, but in Starlog magazine issue 111 in 1986, there was rumours that he was working on a script in between his other projects. J. Michael Straczynski was asked if it would affect the real Ghostbusters. If you remember, it's really popular at the time. But producers of that said that the word on the street was he was working on it, but if there's a sequel, they have no problem with it. Don't forget how popular the real Ghostbusters was at the time. Dan was working away on the new project. Some more information crept out, and Starlog magazine, issue 140, Bill Murray talks about the name The Last of the Ghostbusters. Didn't think it was going to be called Ghostbusters 2. Thinks if we call it Ghostbusters 2, it won't be anything like the first one and wouldn't stand up to comparison. So he actually says if we call it Ghostbusters 2, we'll burn in hell. It happens anyway. It's around this time we hear rumours that there is going to be a banshee in the story. Now, banshee is often depicted as a ghostly woman with long hair, dressed in white or grey, who can be heard mourning and weeping. In some traditions, the banshee is seen as the harbinger of death. So here are some traditional pictures of what banshees might look like. I can kind of see a banshee being in Ghostbusters, very similar to the character that Sigourney Weaver embodied when she was possessed in the film. So this is where we get into the Scottishness of the sequel. For the sequel, Dan once again wrote the initial script, a story in which Dana was kidnapped and taken to Scotland, where she discovered a fairy ring and civilization underground. My first draft was really too far out, that Aykroyd reflected. It was probably too inaccessible, although I thought at the time I wrote it that it was in the direction we should go in. I wanted to leave New York City behind because I thought we had done that, but New York is really the greatest arena for our kind of great ghost stories. And staying in the city gave continuity to the second film. One idea that did stay in the script was the notion of having things occur underground. We went skyward in the first film, up to the top of a skyscraper. So I thought for the second one, it would be nice to see the underbelly of the city. But my original concept was going underground was different. It involved a pneumatic tube 2,000 miles long that they travelled in for 3 days. It was like a primitive mail chute. Now there is a lot of Scottish lore to come as we'll talk about the fairy ring that's mentioned. Now a fairy ring or a fairy circle originates from mushrooms growing in a circle, but it's seen in a more mystical way. So what happens if you enter a fairy circle? Well, most often someone who violates a fairy perimeter becomes invisible to mortals outside and may find it impossible to leave that circle. Often the fairies force the mortal to dance to the point of exhaustion, death or madness. That would be cool to see in a film. Here's some pictures of some mushroom related ones and some more fictional folklore related ones. In more modern times, this transportation system is actually being used in the game RuneScape as a fairy ring transportation system unlocked after starting a Fairy Tale 2 Cure a Queen quest and getting permission from the fairy godfather. So, as you can see, it has actually been used in modern times in quite a creative way, much like Dan had intentioned from his Scottish version of Ghostbusters. In this game, it is a way of transporting to other worlds, so maybe that would have been used within the Ghostbusters idea too. I'm sure he wouldn't have missed out on any folklore. Even as late as 2023, Dan's still interested in the haunted side of Scotland, visiting this haunted hotel. Maybe this idea hasn't died. What do you think? Do you think it would have made a better Ghostbusters 2 or a Ghostbusters 3? Subscribe if you want more content like this. Thanks for watching.